Welcome to 3-Minute History with Mr. Marr. Quick summaries about a range of different history topics. Today we're looking at a slightly different issue, and one that's featured quite regularly in the media recently, and that's the issue of taking down historical statues. There was a very high-profile event when the statue of a slave trader known as Edward Colston in Bristol was torn down by many protesters. These protests initially began following the death of a black man at the hands of the police in the United States. However, they've become more than this. They've opened up a huge debate about worldwide racism faced by black people, including in Britain. This has not just been about statues in Bristol or England. Scotland has had its own debate as well. There are various statues and other monuments such as street names around Scotland which remember many of the people involved in the slave trade. And this therefore has started a huge debate about whether many of these statues should be taken down, including those which have been done in the fairly violent manner which we saw in the case of Edward Colston. Today we're going to have a slightly different episode where we're not going to look at historical facts itself, but we're going to consider this debate. Perhaps the first argument about taking down statues is this: there is a question about whether or not statues help us remember. Those against taking down the statues will make the case that if we remove statues, then the danger that follows is that we begin to forget history itself. One prominent black academic, Professor Jeff Palmer, suggests that removal of statues and other monuments might result in much of black history being erased. However, there are people that counter this. They say, for instance, that we don't need to have statues up in public for us to remember. We have museums, we have school education, and we have other various activities as well which are a way of remembering. It's also pointed out that public attempts to remove statues isn't in itself a form of social living history. There is then questions around the rule of law. Some people have said that even if it's quite correct to use the statues, that it's utterly wrong to do so in a violent manner. They claim that if we allow people to break the law when they wish, in the context of issues we support, such as potentially removing statues or making other changes, the danger is that other people will follow this, taking us towards a series of anarchy. However, the counterpoint to this is of course that many people have been campaigning peacefully and within the law for years to change these. There have been a variety of public protests and petitions to change street names, to remove statues, or at the very least add information to the statues, and none of this has happened, suggesting that perhaps people have grown tired. Other people have put forward the contention about the issue of other countries' experiences. They point out, for instance, that you wouldn't have statues of Hitler in Germany or Stalin in Russia, and based on this they argue we shouldn't have them in this country as well. In more recent times, people remember the statues of Saddam Hussein being torn down in Iraq, and again point to this as inspiration for the need to make changes as needed. However, other people have sought to draw a line between this, suggesting that in the question of the Iraqi statues being removed, this was people who had actually lived under Saddam Hussein's oppression, and thus it was different them removing it as against people making changes when they themselves were not directly affected. There is a final question about whether statues themselves may be a distraction. Certainly, many people may feel it's wrong to glorify slavers, and many people, especially from ethnic minorities, might feel threatened or unwanted by seeing such images in local towns and cities. However, other people have put forward the notion that in fact this may be a distraction, that the removal of statues may make some people believe that that in itself has resolved the issues and problems of racism and the challenges that are faced by people from ethnic minorities. Instead, they say energies would be better spent on introducing laws and other social changes to actually give people from ethnic minorities, including black people, a much fairer chance in life. This is a debate that isn't going away anywhere, so the question is, what do you think? Should we be taking down statues and removing street names?